is Jason J. Rock Houston, and you're listening to Chaotic Riff Magazine. We can be found on the web at www.chaoticriff.com. Special guest today is my longtime friend from a band, Corners of Sanctuary, guitarist Mick Michaels. Welcome to the show once again, Mick. How you doing?
All right, thanks for having me.
And Mick
How you doing?
I'm doing great. And Mick is being interviewed today for our new On the Record segment, where we talk with some of our favorite musicians about some of their favorite albums by their favorite bands. And today, being that Mick is such a huge Kiss fan, he chose to talk about Paul Stanley's 1978 solo album. So let's get right into it, Mick. Why is that the album that did it for you?
It's always been an album. Actually, since the very first time I heard it, it was definitely the album that inspired me to want to be a songwriter.
Oh wow!
Not just a guitar player in a band. I had the urge to write early on. I started out playing drums, and I wanted to write songs, and I found it very difficult. I tried. I did the best that I could with what I had, but it just didn't seem. I wasn't able to get what I was hearing in my head out. So when after hearing the album, I realized that guitar was the vehicle to be able to do that. My older brother played guitar. He was a big Kiss fan, so that definitely helped following in those footsteps. So once I got to guitar, I found quickly that I was able to get some of those ideas out. And that Paul Stanley record really, even today, it's like if I was to be able to write a solo album, it would be very similar, because it's a rock album, yes, but there's so much more to it. And I feel, and I know popular album when it comes to the four Kiss albums. I know Aces is sold the best, and a lot of people talk about it, and I get it. It's a good album. However, again, I believe it's a good album, but I always felt that Ace's album started out good, then it kind of lost some of its fizzle midway to the end. It just seemed like he was hodgepodging a bunch of different songs he was working on, where, in my opinion, Paul Stanley's album, there's a cohesion to it. There's a definite unit to those songs, and they all work. Now, again, a lot of people would say it's dated sounding. It's got that late '70s sound, but man, I love that sound.
Yeah, what's wrong with that? Right? Yeah.
Yeah, there's just something about it. I do know that when I'm writing certain overlaid guitar parts for some of our music, my first reference, audio reference, is what Bob Kulick did on the album. I think that way that Bob and Paul played together was just really, there was a magical, to me, again, this is my opinion, there was just a magical string of material happening that I don't think has been repeated. I liked Paul's second solo album, but he was singing on that first album, and he was doing some great things with his voice that he just touched upon in Kiss, but I think when, he had that deep voice, and then his falsetto high voice, and that in between. To me, that's just musical genius. I think it's a very underrated album. Yeah,
that Paul Stanley album from '78. I mean, of the four solo albums, like you said, typically that album and the Ace Frehley one kind of get cited as the most influential ones. I think Paul's mostly because obviously it's the most Kiss-like of the four.
I think it's more than a lot of what Kiss was doing. Being that I was a primary writer for the band, I think that with his solo album, he got much deeper, and it was much more emotional, like real solid emotional content, not just kind of like on the surface, hey, we're getting laid type of thing, or this beautiful girl and stuff like that. I think that this was more like a heartfelt type of emotion.
Probably.
And I think,
best example of that is "Tonight You Belong to Me." Yeah,
absolutely. Well, even again, some of the like "Love in Chains." I mean, that's a rockin' song. Okay? It's a rockin' song, but there's so much content to it, and emotion. You can feel that he was struggling with some, and again, maybe not. He was able to create this character that had this these emotional feelings, and the outlet was through the music. But I think after reading his bio, I think a lot of it was his own personal emotions deep down inside, what he was dealing with, the isolation from the real world type of thing, and his struggles to find a solid relationship. I really think that album has so much more than the other three. Even right up to
right up to the final song, which Al Fitting you ended with Goodbye, but Goodbye is even a really rockin' tune for what it is, and it's kind of very different, as you say, from a typical Kiss song.
Yeah, with Goodbye, I always thought it was a fitting end song for the album, because there's actually a sadness to it. When you hear that chorus, and it makes you want to just kind of flip over that album. I've listened to that album so many times, and I have it in vinyl. I have it, I wound up getting it in cassette, so I could travel with it much easier. I got it on CD, when CDs you get, because I was wearing my original vinyl is all scratched up and stuff like that. But,
wow.
It's one of those. It's an album that I constantly go back to. I think it was mixed and recorded really well. It's got a really warm tone to it. And like I said, it's definitely the album that has inspired me to be a better songwriter. I still don't think I've achieved it, so I'm still working towards that.
Yeah.
But it's definitely that. There's that with the lyric and the music, that combination, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, and Bob Kulick, like you said, he was a big part of that album. I would say, the album mainly was what it was because of him. The other musicians are just as important, but I'd say him and Bob Kulick were kind of the stars on that album, and I think it shows the chemistry they had once upon a time. And as we all know the story now, Bob Kulick was originally going to be in Kiss before they had auditioned Ace. I think Paul and him were good friends, and Gene, and he was originally their pick, but then they saw Ace, and that kind of changed. Ace more had the sound for Kiss, more had the look, I guess, than Bob. But Bob was at that time he was an up and coming all-star. I mean, he had just done the Alice Cooper tour for Welcome to My Nightmare, and then him and Bruce would go on to tour with Meatloaf for Bat Out of Hell. So even today, when people talk about Bob Kulick, that's the album they go to, and you almost kind of, with Paul Stanley's album, you see what Kiss might have sounded like with Bob Kulick in it,
Yeah, again, I love Ace's playing. Ace is a guitar player that definitely inspired me early on. Still inspires me to this day, because to me, Ace has a simple sophistication to his playing. I know he's often called it a very sloppy style of playing.
Yeah.
But again, I appreciate that very much so, because I have a kind of a sloppy style of playing myself. But he was able to capture a lot in the little bit of notes that he used at the time. He wasn't a giant shredder. That wasn't really a consideration back then. But even today, he has a distinct sound. So I'm very appreciative of that. And like I said, he's a huge influence on me.
Yeah.
But I think that Bob's playing, like I was mentioning, gave more of a progressive sound to Paul's idea. And you're right, I think that we did get a glimpse of what it would have been like if he was playing
Kiss.
more, or made it into Kiss or whatever. He definitely had a distinct sound in his guitar, especially with lead. And at that time, there's a very late 70s sound to there. You can hear it, today. Like, if you're aware of it, if you remember that time, it's like a time capsule. And I know that by today's standards, it's dated, but
what's
for a
wrong?
person that grew up during that time and still loves that sound, that analog sound, I think it's a classic. And if we can get back to more of that type of songwriting, I think the music industry would have a boost.
I mean, Mick, let's just be honest here. I mean, as we sit here in 2020 and we're talking about an album came out in 1978. I mean, Kiss Unmasked came out, 1980. That's 40 years old now. I mean, just think about that for a minute,
Oh yeah, it is crazy. It is crazy. Absolutely, I agree. And every year that album is still taking on new fans, and I mean that just shows you the power of
Kiss and their longevity.
Yeah, and regardless of what people like to say or talk about them today, listen, they're a band that has stood the test of time, and they keep going.
Yeah.
They may be they may not be the band that they once were, but none of us were. None of us are.
But I'll tell you why I think Kiss has lasted for 50 years, Mick. You make the very good point that, like for example, you're talking about the Paul Stanley album, just greatly written songs. I mean, especially if let's be honest, Gene and Paul wrote the bulk of most of the Kiss hits that we all know and love and hear on the radio all the time, and they may not be the greatest musicians in the world, but I'll tell you what, they got a great catalog of music. They got the songs, and that's why 50 years into it, people are still going to see Kiss.
Absolutely. That's a misconception, I think, for today. A lot of people think that if you're really good at playing the instrument, you're going to be a really good songwriter, and that's not necessarily the case. Remember, songwriting is something that you're trying to grab a larger audience to gravitate towards, right?
Yeah.
And if you're writing in the mainstream, and there's nothing wrong with saying that, if you want to write for the mainstream audience, then you have to write to what grabs people's attention. Listen, there's limitations as listeners, right? I mean, I enjoy super heavy progressive stuff with a lot of changes and stuff, but not for very long. I can't listen to it for more than maybe a half an hour at a time. And that's not because I dislike it or anything. That's because that's the way our brains are wired. We can only take on so much new information in about 20 minutes at a time. And then we kind of lose attention, lose focus, and then we kind of just drop out. But groups that write songs that really click, and again, we're talking mainstream now, like John Bon Jovi, like Kiss did, things like that. It's because they're touching upon chords in the human condition that we can quickly relate to. There's a comfort level, and we enjoy, and we want to hear them over and over and over again. Hence, why pop music is kind of, we're inundated with it over and over and over again. It's high repetition.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Kiss catalog, for example. I mean, you go all the way back to the first album. You take a song like "Nothing to Lose." I mean, that's drastically different from what Kiss typically does. I mean, it's almost got a Chuck Berry feel to the song, and they got the kind of neat sounding piano on it, and it's a different sounding tune. And you got "Nothing to Lose." You got everything from that to Detroit Rock City. Beth and Forever. I mean, they can do it all.
Absolutely. Well, a lot of people, with here in 2020, what a lot of people would kind of not put together is, but I mean, the first Kiss album came out when?
1973. Yeah.
73. Okay, 73. So you're only talking 10 years, 10, 12 years from Chuck Berry.
Yeah.
At his height, right? So that was, think about 10 years ago, right? I know music changes so radically now, but up until a certain point, like a 10-year time of music, those artists kind of held their own for a long time. Now artists come and go. Every year there's 56 new ones and a bunch of different songs, and then 6 months later it's But some of those bands were like the Beatles, the Stones. They all had that sound, and they were all influenced by Chuck Berry. It wouldn't have been a far stretch for a band, 73 coming out with their album. They had some stuff happening before. They were influenced by it, so that made sense. And then as the band kind of grew together as a real unit, things were changing.
And even
I go back then. I still listen. I mean, you do, I do, many people do. We still listen to those albums, and they're pushing 50 years old. Yeah,
and even Kiss, many people may be surprised to learn that especially Gene and Paul were really influenced by the Beatles. You may think Kiss has nothing, they sound nothing like the Beatles, but in a sense, they got a songwriting style very much like the Beatles. I mean, the Beatles, for example, they got that compilation album called The Number One. It's 27 number one hit songs, and just think about that. How many bands can say they have 27 number one hits? And that's quite an accomplishment.
Absolutely. In a time when there wasn't the internet and we couldn't digitally download, absolutely, it's amazing.
And you were just talking about bands wanting to be progressive in that, and I'll tell you a great example that I kind of discovered a few weeks ago myself, Mick. I don't know if you ever had a chance to hear the very first Judas Priest album. It's called Rockarola. Well, I came across it on like you can check out the whole album like on YouTube, and I never really heard the album, so I was listening to it, and interestingly enough, if you, that really sounds not too much like what you'd expect a Judas Priest album. You could hear kind of the potential that was in the band, but like if you would play it next to like even Hell Bent for Leather or even Painkiller, it sounds nothing like Judas Priest. You could again hear the potential was in the band, and there's like an 8-minute track on there. It almost sounds like a progressive rock tune. And then I was reading up on it and come to find out part of the reason the album sounded so differently in that is Rob Halford was very much on the album, but some of the songs were written by the original singer, and so he's singing songs that he didn't originally write. And that's a good example of that. You go back and listen to that, you can hear the potential that was in that band, that they sound nothing like what Judas Priest became.
Oh, absolutely. Judas Priest is my
other
favorite
band.
Yeah, my other favorite band. Like, I mean, between Kiss and Judas Priest, I go back and forth.
Yeah.
The thing with Judas Priest is every single album, to me, is Judas Priest.
Yeah.
But each album, they touched upon something different.
Yeah,
and I love these early progressive rock albums of theirs. I mean, the first 3 albums are really amazing.
Yeah.
Actually, I enjoy all their albums. I even like Turbo. Turbo, to me, Turbo has some of the best vocal parts Halford's ever done.
Yeah.
His voice was super strong. And anyway, but every album was Judas Priest, and they were just kind of taking ideas, making them and packaging them in an album. And there was like we were talking about, like with Paul's album, it's very cohesive. There's a continuity to the album from start to finish.
Definitely,
that you can tell. Where I don't feel that with Ace's album. Same with Gene's album. Gene's album is a good album. It's like that whole charisma type of thing.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like all over the place. Like he was just throwing stuff at the wall. Like, hey, let me do this. Let me do that. Let me do that. And then Peters, I can't even really comment on Peters. I've heard that the least amount of times, and I don't.
It's funny you say that because everything I've ever read up on all 4 albums, that's kind of the opinion where it's pretty much whoever you talk to say they'll tell you Peter Criss's is like their least favorite of the 4. And I think part of it, not that it's a bad album, I'll tell you the best tune on that album that I like, I gotta say, is the cover of Tossin' and Turn. I think it's the most Kiss-like, the most kind of rock sounding. But like I've even heard him talk in the interviews before he was ever in Kiss. He says he was more of a jazz drummer. He had to kind of learn to become a rock drummer, and so that was kind of his thing. And I just don't think too many Kiss fans want to hear a jazz album or something that drastically different from Kiss.
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. He was coming from a different place. A lot of that stuff, I think, was those albums were what not necessarily they weren't. I mean, I don't think the guys came to them saying, "Hey, we're going to do this commercially such and such a way."
Yeah.
I think that they just felt that at one time the Beatles could put out anything and it was going to sell. Go platinum, right? So I think that they may have gotten into that
trap
frame of mind at that time too. So they each went and did their own thing as they wanted to do, with blinders on, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I think that's why you see 4. The only thing that pulls those 4 albums together is the artwork, and that they were released on the same day.
Yeah, that was kind of unique, because it's kind of like if you're a Kiss fan back then, you're getting 4 new albums, the same day, which is kind of unique in itself. And I think the reason people like the Ace album so much, because up until that point, only thing I ever heard Ace sing lead on was "Shock Me," because up until that point, I've heard him say in interviews that he was not comfortable being the lead singer. He didn't think he was a great lead singer. He still, to this day, doesn't consider himself a lead singer. Kind of sings out of necessity. But once he did "Shock Me" and people liked it, he thought, "Oh, maybe I could do this." I think that's why when you listen to the album, you say the more you go into it, kind of, I have the same feeling. I don't like some of the songs, later on the album. The best songs I think are right at the top, especially I would say that top 3, like "Speeding Back to My Baby," "Rip It Out."
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
they were also, in my opinion, that top end of the album was also better recorded, better mixed. There's a little bit more of some substance to the production of it, and then it seems like it kind of fizzles out a little bit. Absolutely. One of the things that, especially during that time, and then up until the point that Ace left, I know he was. You could go back on interviews, and he was bitching and complaining that we weren't playing rock, like doing enough rock. I just wanted to rock and all this kind of stuff. But it always kind of intrigued me. It's like, well, the songs that you wound up releasing on Dynasty and Kiss Unmasked, the songs that he did, they weren't as rocky as in my opinion, what I would think would be rocky. I think he could have done even better. Like, I think, like, he was doing his best singing, his best guitar playing by the time Kiss Unmasked came out. Like, you could just tell by the way it was being played, the sound and all. Like, it was all coming together, and then, unfortunately, he went some other place and then, had a layoff. But,
and even by Unmasked, it's kind of funny because by that point, we didn't, as Kiss fans, we didn't know at the time that Peter was not even on that album. It was Anton Fig, but so Ace kind of had a higher profile because he was all of a sudden the third man at the top, so to speak, and he even had three songs on that album as far as singing lead. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's when we were kids, and we just took whatever was on the liner. Like, that's Peter. But there was like we had said, wow, Peter's playing different. Like we immediately picked up on the fact that wasn't the same drum style that we heard.
Yeah.
And we just figured, hey, you know what? These guys they play all the time. They're getting better. They probably work with different people. They try different styles. Guitar players do that stuff all the time. So we just assumed the same thing.
Now, it's funny you bring up that point because back in the day, we're talking about 1978, especially for the solo albums. Kiss had this thing. This predates internet. At that time, people were always trying to get photos of them without their makeup. They had a thing about not being seen outside of the makeup, and they wanted, even when Peter and Ace got heavily into the drugs and alcohol, they didn't want anybody to know what was going on inside the band. I mean, up until a few years ago, except for outside the Paul Stanley album, none of us knew that Bob Kulick played on all those other, as a well-guarded secret. So I was kind of curious, Mick, when you first learned, for example, like Anton Fig did not play on, it was Anton Fig, not Peter Criss, like on Dynasty and Unmasked, or, that Bob Kulick played all the studio tracks except for Rocket Ride on Alive 2. Did you feel kind of let down, or just, who cares? It just sounds just as great as ever?
Well, again, I love the albums, and it didn't
matter.
What bothered me about it, and because being a player myself, like I wouldn't
do that.
I wouldn't enjoy the fact that somebody else would come in and do my job.
Yeah.
Like if I was given the opportunity to do the job, I would do the job. That's what and like a lot of people, I guess again, like when that I can't speak for them or that type of situation, but I guess when you hit that higher echelon, your perspective changes, and you figure, they can't do it without me, or maybe they don't. As long as he's the guy that's in the limelight, they don't care what's going on around them, or what gets done. And I'm sure that there was, for them to say, like there was a lot of talk about they didn't know that this was happening, or they didn't, like Ace said, well, I didn't know, I did play the lead here, and but then I didn't know. I'm not. I mean, producers had a lot more of a say back then because the record companies brought them in. I recently read an interview, or I listened to an interview on Full Bloom that I can't remember the guy, but they said, producers are brought in by the band and can be fired. They just can't make these changes without that. But that's not necessary. I don't know if that's really true or not. I think he was just covering his own butt. But I've read plenty of things, testimony and stuff like that from people that said, the producer had the final say about certain things, especially if the record company was paying for it and they wanted to make sure they had a mega hit. So it's possible, but if the stories are true and Ace has decided to play cards over recording stuff for, Destroyer, or some of the other albums, and it's his own damn fault. That's I look at it.
Ace has even copped to a lot of that. He's saying that I was strung out on alcohol and stuff. I was always loaded and stuff, but like even like you said, Destroyer. A lot of Kiss fans don't even know that. I think it was for the solo for Sweet Pain. Ace doesn't play on that. It's actually the guitar player from Alice Cooper, which was Dick Wagner.
Right.
Yeah.
Dick Wagner, yeah.
Yeah.
Which I actually, when they did the Destroyer Resurrected, when Bob Ezrin came out with that, I like the original way better. However, I do like the Sweet Pain
remix.
Lead, that aced it, and I don't understand why they did it one way or the other. Listen, you don't know what kind of deals these guys make. It could have been a contract thing. It could have been, hey, I owe you for dope. How about you just play on this thing, and we'll call it whatever. They could have gotten points. They needed money. Who knows?
Yeah, you'd be amazed though. I was reading recently. I think it was on Sleaze Rock. Eric Turner, a guitar player from Warren. He's the original lead guitar player, and he was let it be known that like on the first two Warren albums, that they brought this other guy named Mike Slammer, and he actually played like half the solos on the album, and it wasn't. He kind of, I guess, helped show Joey and Eric, how to play the solos or what to play, and so there's a lot of even Beau Hill. He's the guy that produced all those great Rad albums.
Right.
I've read about a lot of people don't know, like on the last Twisted Sister album, which is, I think, Love is for Suckers, he actually brought in Reb Beach, before he had his big success with Winger, and he played a lot of those guitar solos, because that was originally going to be a Dee Snider album. So I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure how much the guys from Twisted Sister really played on that.
Actually played on that album. I mean, I know they did the tour.
Yeah.
And they call it their album, but I don't know how much playing they actually did. I think it was a completely different band altogether, but that may be, except for the drummer that they used in Twisted Sister, Franco.
Yeah, Joe Franco. From a good Rats.
I think he's on there. But hey, listen, whatever makes the grade, I guess. People forget that it's a business, and sometimes, it's just like a movie. You got to have as many people sometimes on the payroll as possible to make that movie a hit. So, who knows?
Yeah, but you make a very good point there. And, getting back to Paul Stanley, like two other songs I like out there that were really kind of Kiss-like were Wouldn't You Like to Know Me and It's All Right. Those I just think are like great classic rock tunes.
Yeah, again, like Wouldn't You Like to Know Me? There is such a heartfelt delivery in that chorus.
And the way he sings it,
Yeah, you can feel it. I mean, again, you can feel it. Like, so here's the thing. I think that people that truly, really get into Paul Stanley's album, like as it is, and can like it's a deep fascination with it. I think are people that are more artistically inclined
there you go.
to feel those type of emotions, right? Where again, Aces is a solid rock album. I mean, there's no two ways about it, right? So if you're looking at it on the surface type of thing, because not a lot of people, your average audience, your average listener, they don't want to go much further than the surface. That's not what they're there for, right? That's it's in and out. But for those of us, like, again, it moved me enough to say, like, I want to be a good songwriter. This was that type of song. Like, I want to get that type of emotion
in your music,
my lyrics, into the music, into the riff, into the vocal parts, the whole bit. I think that it's more for those kind of people, and that's why there's this people like don't like it, or they don't get it, or they think it was too soft, or too it was whatever the case. I mean, I've heard it called a lot of things that I'm not going to repeat, but it's good, solid music, and you can't take that away. And it's stood the test of time for me.
The interesting thing, going back to Bob Kulick for a minute, what an important part of that album he was. I've read, like, in, I think it was Paul Stanley's book, where he mentioned at the time that both him and Gene were just in awe of Bob Kulick as a guitar player. They thought he was a man at the time. He could do it all. In fact, so much that Gene even wanted Bob to play on his solo album, but Paul told him, no, Bob's playing on my album. He's not playing on yours. And that's why I guess later on they brought him in to like play on Alive 2 and some other albums. I even heard he plays on some of Creatures of the Night album. I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah, till this day, there's still some discrepancy on who was on and who wasn't. There's still some talk that Ace may have recorded some stuff he couldn't remember, but it's possible. I don't understand how.
You cannot remember being there.
Yeah, I mean, back then they used to take some meticulous notes during recording and sessions and like that. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they're just keeping it quiet. I don't know.
Yeah.
But listen, Bob Kulick he was a fantastic guitar player. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. And it's a shame that he never got the type of attention that he should have. I mean, listen, he did well for himself. Yeah. He was able to keep working. I mean, he was not employed, but like his association with Kiss gave him a mainstay. I mean, he did the cruises. He played with his with his brother Bruce. He would guest spot in tribute bands, or
he did a lot of those like great tribute albums he produced and stuff like that.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not like he didn't have a career. But I think that he would have had a bigger career if he was given a shot earlier on.
Hey,
when Paul Stanley went out again in what was it, 88 or 89, he took Bob with him. I don't think he didn't take Bob out when he did
Live to Win. No.
Tour.
That's what I didn't understand. I thought, maybe he just wants to do something different, but who really knows what the reason was? But but like, he had a pretty good career right up until the end. It's kind of sad the way it ended between him and his brother, kind of having a falling out. And we don't really know what that was over, but it apparently had a lot to do with the. He wanted to do a thing with the Kulick brothers, and he wanted to do a full-blown album, and I guess Gene and Paul were wanting too much control. Well, you guys did that on the Kiss cruise, so it's like a Kiss energy.
Yeah.
And
there was some merchandise stuff or something. I don't really.
That's what I've heard. Yeah.
But I do think, and again, I don't want to talk
bad about anybody. Yeah.
Again, Bob Kulick was one of those guys that definitely
made
inspire me to want to be an artist. I think he was bitter over the years as time went on, because he didn't get the credit that he should have gotten, especially for at the time. I mean, think about it. In the 70s, he's ghost playing for the biggest band in the world from that at that era, and I think I guess it could play havoc on someone.
And I guess the way,
their spirit, their mentality.
I guess, and kind of sadly between them all, but he did have a pretty nice career, and a lot of it was because, I mean, everything wasn't Kiss related, but I mean, a lot of people, the reason they even cared anything about Bob Kulick was because of all the work he'd done in and around the Kiss camp, and but like he played on Diana Ross album, Lou Reed albums, and Meatloaf, so he had a nice little career for himself, but I always kind of wondered why him and Bruce didn't do something together. In fact, I remember when Bruce put out that BK3 album, I interviewed him. I was asking, "Hey Bruce, you ever given? How come you and Bob never really kind of done?" He said, "Oh, well, we just are always kind of busy or whatever." But I was kind of surprised they never did more together.
Well, there's that
brotherly thing.
Well, there's that thing. Yeah, there's that brotherly thing. Older brother, younger brother. Unfortunately, his younger brother got to play in Kiss, and he didn't.
Yeah.
So you never know.
What their role?
I'm kind of just surmising.
What might have been. Yeah.
Like stuff that I've read.
Yeah.
But there could have been a lot of that. Who knows? It's a shame.
But I will say this: one time they did get to perform as the Kulick brothers on the cruise, and probably you've seen it too, the video of it, of the performance. I mean, it was amazing. I thought, okay, at least they got to do that, and it was like from both of their eras of Kiss, but it was just amazing.
Yeah, I enjoyed watching. Yeah, I mean, I've enjoyed some of Bob's instructional videos.
Yeah. In fact, I don't know if you're aware of this, Mick, but there's this thing that Bruce and him did do together, a DVD, like an instructional DVD. It's called Kiss. I think it's called Kiss Forever, and I think they did it at Bob's studio, where Bob plays like All American Man and some of the stuff he did on All Life too, and Bruce does some stuff from like Crazy Nights and some of the stuff he recorded with Kiss over the years. It's kind of a cool video as a Kiss fan. You probably dig checking it out. I think you could even check it out on YouTube.
Going back to the thing that you said earlier about Gene and Paul being inspired by the Beatles. That was definitely they. I know Gene had written that they wanted to be
like a hard rock Beatles,
American type, hard rock version of the Beatles. I think even in that 80s video that they had, they did that little bit of acoustic stuff, and they had that very much of a Beatles thing to them. So it was coolness to it.
Yeah, before we wrap up the Paul Stanley portion of the interview, I got to ask you, okay, so we know what a great frontman and a great songwriter Paul is, what a great solo album he put out in 1978, but what do you think of him like as a rhythm guitar player? Because, I mean, I think the guy can kind of do it all. He's a great singer, great songwriter, great live performer, great guitar player. I don't think he gets his really his dues as a guitar player, but like if you even go back all the way and you look at a song like off of Dress to Kill, Rock Bottom, I don't know if you've ever seen a video, like I've seen this video, I think it was on one of the Kiss Street videos, of Paul and Ace, they're up on stage, they're doing that little intro, and then it just blasts into the song,
Yeah, listen, rhythm guitar players, number one, are often overlooked or underappreciated because everybody looks at the flash and the bang, right? I spent most of my playing being a rhythm guitar player. Yeah. I came up when coming up, making my bones. I was a backup guitar player, second guitar player, so to speak. I honed my skills that way. Even today, I'm a single guitar player in the band. However, I don't consider myself a lead guitar player.
Oh, wow.
I never really had any interest in playing lead, and I'll tell you why. Because there was guys like Paul Stanley, KK Downing. Guys like that. Even though KK played a lot of lead later on, but he was always considered the second guitar player.
Yeah.
I found it without a solid rhythm, you don't have anything else, right? It's kind of like the leader of the bass and the drum section, right? So I know Paul hasn't, especially early on, a lot of guys complained that none of them were really that great players. But like I said, you don't have to be the great player to be able to write a good song. It's simple as that. But I think Paul is a solid player. I mean, there's no way in hell that he could have done what he did all these years. They did it live, so everything's not going to be perfect. Yeah. Nobody's perfect. Everybody's cleaned up here and there, especially on why would you release an album that sounded like crap?
Oh yeah.
Think about it. Like you do your best. Like these, directors, producers release a movie the best that they can. They try to, do what they can within their budget or within their means. And you're going to do the same thing with an album. So why would you release something that sounded horrible? Same with your singing and all. But listen, the guy's got 50 years. If I could last a tenth of what he did, that would be awesome. So I think he's definitely a good guitar player. He's probably better now than he ever was. But I'm sure he could run circles around a lot of guys.
And I got to ask you.
Here's the thing.
Go.
Same idea. He wanted to be a songwriter. Yeah. He was a songwriter. Yeah. He was the front man of a band, a singer, right? So again, the guy that's singing, he doesn't have to be known to be doing a lot of things. He's doing his own stuff. Yeah. Especially in those days, the 60s, 70s, early 80s, there was a dedicated lead guitar player. Yeah. Nowadays, everybody plays lead as fast as you can, and one person's trying to outdo the other person. Drummer's trying to play super fast. Now you got lead bass.
What's that? Yeah, I mean, you bring up Judas Priest, and I think part of the reason they never had like a real lead player, because what Priest had, especially back in the classic days, is you had that double lead attack of KK and Glenn, and you're like, they both were just as powerful players as the other,
Absolutely. Two distinct sounds put together, man. It was unstoppable. They're phenomenal.
Yeah, and I got to ask as a Kiss fan, because around the same time these solo albums came out, also the Kiss movie, Kiss Meets the Phantom. What did you think about that at the time, and what do you think of it, all these years later?
Look, well, when I was a kid, I was super excited about watching it. I remember watching it. I thought it was awesome as anything. I did not see the movie again until, I don't know, maybe 86.
Yeah.
And I remember watching it, and I'm going, man, whoa.
Yeah.
There was some.
It's kind of campy.
So I started picking up on the bad acting and stuff like that. But there was still something quirky perky about it.
Yes.
And I've watched it again, maybe a dozen or so more times since then. And I've showed it to my kids, and stuff like that. And there's some it's kind of a cult thing now. Like
it's kind of multi-generational. Like you said, you show it to your kids, And I still dig it as a Kiss fan for what it is. It kind of reminds me of watching like classic Batman, from 1966, Adam West, that style kind of.
Right.
But what's interesting is when you're a kid and you're watching it, you're not aware of all these other things going on in the movie. Like, for example, I'm sure you've heard the band talk about the fact that that's not even Peter Criss's voice. When you're watching the movie as a kid, you're not thinking, hey, that doesn't sound like Peter Criss. So they must have dubbed somebody else's voice.
Well, I used to watch, of course, at that time, I'm still a young kid. I used to watch Saturday morning cartoons like it was going out of style.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing the voice, and I recognized the voice right away. And I remember turning to my parents or my older brother or something. I said, "Wow, I didn't know Peter Criss did Saturday morning cartoons."
What?
I said, "That's awesome."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was like, "Wow, that's killer."
Yeah.
And it's there. Apparently, there's a one promo you can find it on YouTube that they did the show in the weeks prior before they did the full overlay, which has Peter Criss's voice on it.
Wow.
There was a TV promo that had his voice on it. I've only seen it a couple times.
Wow, and I don't know if you're aware of this, Mick, as a Kiss fan or not, but I've heard over years the reason they released those 4 solo albums was because while they were filming the movie, I guess that's when they started having real issues with Peter and Ace's drug use and alcohol, and the two guys are always threatening to, we're gonna leave Kiss, we're gonna go solo, and this and that, and so it was the manager Bill Coyne's idea. Hey, you know what? Instead of you guys leaving, why don't we have each of you do a solo album? We'll do it within Kiss, release them as Kiss albums, and that's where the whole idea for that came about.
Yeah, absolutely. They were just trying to keep the band together, and unfortunately, it seemed to drive them apart. The funny thing is Peter's left. He left once, left twice, left 3 times.
Yeah.
And he never did anything after it. He was just a bitter guy.
Yeah. I don't know. Like a few years ago, he did this thing, and he was calling it like his final solo performance, and he performed like a lot of more of his solo material, and like Beth and a couple of his other Kiss tunes. But I was like kind of laughing about, well, you never had much of a solo career. What do you mean your final performance, like one of your only ever performances?
Yeah, I remember in the 80s, he was going to do Balls of Fire or Great Balls of Fire or something like that. I remember seeing it in Hit Parader.
Yeah.
And then I remember the write-up. I remember the picture. It was really cool, and I was looking forward to it. I was like, well, let's see what's happening here. And nothing ever came about of it. So, it's one of those things. It's too for the longest time.
Yeah.
I liked some of Ace's stuff that he did.
Yeah.
Rock Soldier and the Night.
Yeah.
Or whatever it was, I didn't like the fact that he was, he was singing and he had another guy singing, and it's just kind of like that first album was all over the place. But
well, I can tell you real quick. I've interviewed Todd Howard, the guy from Fraley's Comet that did some of the lead singing, the other guitar player, and he was telling me about the second sighting. That's the second Fraley's Comet album. A lot of fans didn't like that because it was mostly like Todd Howard doing the lead vocal, and he said that wasn't my choice. He said part of the reason was Ace was always showing up to the studio drunk and high, and we had to get the album done. And so, since I did some of the lead singing of it, the manager and the rest of the band put it on me. Well, since Ace isn't showing up to do the vocals, we'll just have you do all the lead vocal. And he said that's why it kind of fell on him on the second album to do half the the lead vocals.
Right.
And
like I said, everybody has to do what they have to do to get those albums out to make them sound as good as possible. I totally get it. But I'm just saying, as a fan, I was kind of disappointed because I wanted to hear more of Ace.
I got to ask you real quick, what do you think of a new Origins 2 album? I kind of think it's the best thing he's done in years. Even though it's a cover CD.
Yeah, it's really good. He's been, like I was going to say, like he's probably his career of his music is probably more popular now than it was in the 80s in terms of when he was doing Fraley's Comet and all that stuff. I think because of his stint with Kiss and then with all the controversy and then so there's a big support for him and then he's been doing a lot of stuff and I think he's really come up with a way with this Origins thing to stay current and to ride the success of songs that were, that had some hits to them before. I think it's a really smart, marketable idea.
And what's funny is I think he's almost been more successful in the second half of his solo career, because you forget, like, from 1990 when Trouble Walking came out, there was like a 20-year gap between albums, and then since he came back 20 years after that, I mean, he just put out solid albums. I gotta tell you, on the New Origins 2 album, I love it all from top to bottom, but I gotta tell you, I think my favorite track on there is 30 Days in the Hole. And see, he's smart in that, like he said, I want to try to sing that, but I knew I just didn't have it in me to do that. So he's smart to get a guy like Robin Zander, because I tell you, Robin Zander just kills it on that.
Yeah, he's oh God, I love Cheap Trick, man. He's just there's a guy who hasn't lost his voice, hasn't lost his charisma. He's still cool. I mean, he just emulates cool. That's a cool band.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Now, Mick, before I let you go, we got to talk a little bit about your own band, Corners of Sanctuary. Now, I know, I got to tell people, I think it's obvious that you're such a Kiss fan in the fact that you seem like you have the work ethic of Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons. I mean, since I've known you and been interviewing you over years, I mean, your band is constantly coming out with new music. I mean, back in the day, Kiss used to release an album or two, every single year. I mean, you guys have pretty much done that, as long as I've been talking to you.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, when this band got together, one of the things that I remember talking about early on with the guys was that I wanted to kind of emulate that idea of what Kiss did, and that's no BS, because then first couple of years, every 6 months, they were coming out with a full album. So I said, we should be able to write like that. That's what bands are supposed to do. They're supposed to write, create music. So we do it. And, we do an album, we'll do a couple singles, we'll do an EP, we'll keep the stuff out there. And being that with the digital technology, once we're finally to get a handle on it, understand it, and have it work for us, it's definitely been benefiting. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know
we have a new album coming out at the end of this month, October 30th. It's called Heroes Never Die. It's our 7th full-length album.
Wow.
And it's on RFL Records. You can, some singles have already been released, and we're excited about it.
Come October,
and we're in the studio now working on a follow-up EP for next year.
Now, October 30th, the release date. Now, when that day comes, will people be actually able to order physical copies if they like?
Yes, actually, you can pre-order now.
Oh, great.
You can go to rflrecords.com. You can go to cornersofsanctuary.com. We're on our Facebook. You can pre-order it now, but yes, you can get physical copies. They'll start shipping on the 30th.
And oh, that's great. And so, tell us a little bit about the new album, Mick, as far as like how many songs do we get on the album and all that.
There's 12 songs. They're all brand new, all original. It's a continuation, so to speak, of our last album, The Galloping Hordes, in terms of there's a theme that we're kind of running with. We started this album the same time in terms of writing and recording when we did our last album, Galloping Hordes. We went into the studio with the idea like, hey, we have all these songs, let's do a double, let's do an album. As we started to record, we kind of started realizing that, hey, nobody does double albums anymore. So we shelved a lot of songs, and we're just going to focus on the one album, and we'll do some touring around it. And that's what we did. And we had been going back and forth over the last 2 years to try to finish up the other album. We had to write some more material for it. But it would start, it would stop, because we'd gone to Europe, we did a West Coast tour, we were in the UK. So we were constantly starting and stopping. The COVID pandemic actually provided us the opportunity to finish the album last spring, to have it ready to release. So it's a heavy driving album. It's a little darker in terms of sound, but it's still Corners of Sanctuary. It may be a little bit more progressive, but not heavily progressive. It still keeps to our style of playing and all. But we just kind of expanded it. Some of the themes were a little bit more deeper. We're talking about war and the effects that war has on people, on communities, on families, on individuals. And there's a lot of perspective from the soldier viewpoint. So we're kind of excited about getting it out there and sharing with people. It's been a long time coming for us. It's been 2 years since we released a full-length album, but we've had some EPs and stuff in the process. So we're excited about it.
Now the EPs that you released in between, do any of those end up on the new full length, or is it all new music?
The Forgotten Country that we released in March, no, nothing from there. But we did do a COVID song that we released in April, early. I can't remember when we did.
Yeah. I heard about that you guys had done something.
That song was remixed, and it will appear on the album.
Oh wow! And now you said a lot of these songs are written like from the soldier's perspective. Is that just because that's something you're interested in, or do you know somebody personally that was in the service or something?
And we do have friends that did serve in the First Gulf War, Second Gulf War.
Okay.
There's a song called Combat Shock that me and Mad T wrote, and some of that song was written from the stories that my grandfather used to relate to me about World War II.
Wow,
he spent 3 months in a trench, but he also used to run alongside the tanks. And we would talk about like what the chaos that he experienced, and sometimes you get this tunnel vision because all this explosions happening around you, and you get this ringing in your ear. And that's actually part of the song. There's this ringing in your ear.
Oh wow!
And so there was some of that. Matt T, he's got a master's in history, so he's kind of a bit of a historian type of guy, and he likes a lot of that stuff as well. So. He likes to pen about it once in a while, and put it into the music. So there's kind of that, it's an interesting topic. It seems to work well with our music, and I think there's a story to be told by talking to some of the people that we have, and how grateful we are that that did this for us, so that others wouldn't have to.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I forget what the album title was, but I remember Queensryche when Jeff Tate was still in the band. I think one of the final albums he did with the band was kind of based on a soldier story or something like that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And let me ask you, Mick, are you the principal songwriter in the band, or does everybody take part in that?
I am the principal songwriter, especially when it comes to the music. However, over our last 2 albums, some of the other guys have gotten involved. Matt, he's with us. Our drummer's been with us for 4 years now. He contributes some lyrical writings, and he actually plays guitar too.
Oh, wow.
This album and our last album had some guitar pieces that he did created, and that we worked together on, which was exciting and challenging for me all at the same time because he has a different style altogether. So I had to learn that. And then I had to what I call cosify them so that I could actually play them, and that they could kind of fit into our repertoire, our style. So it takes us someplace else, and you'll definitely be able to hear that in this album. There's a song, actually we released it a few weeks back called "Into the Fight" that Matt T wrote part of the guitar, and I wrote the other part, and we put it together, and it just really creates a new dynamic. And then being that he writes lyrics as well is definitely, and even James, our bass player, has a song on this album that he helped, me and him co-wrote.
Oh wow,
lyrically.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so it's kind of exciting. I actually like the fact that more people will get involved. I never pushed it. I never dominated and saying, listen, I'm the only one to do it, nobody else can do it. It's
kind
never
of
been
how
like
it's
that.
always been.
Yeah, it's always been open. Hey, you got something, let's bring it to the table. And we're at a point now that I think as a unit we're more comfortable with where we're trying to go, what we're trying to achieve. And I think because of that, it's allowed others to say, hey, let me throw this into the ring now.
And do you think that's part of the reason there's more of a progressive sound? I mean, I don't think you set out to say, let's go make a progressive sounding album. It just kind of happened organically because everybody kind of is contributing.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I think that's how bands. There's a maturation of a band over time, and it continues. It doesn't stop. It keeps evolving. And when you're getting there's certain songs on the album that I call artistic songs. These are songs, and I always felt that albums had that, especially back in the old days. There was always those songs that were really good, but you knew they weren't going to be played live.
Yeah.
You know, I think they're called deep cuts now, right? That's what I think they call them, deep cuts, deep tracks, something like that. I don't know. But we have a couple of them on this album. They are artistic songs. You know, they're probably too long for the live arena, but at the same time, there's some depth that we put into them, some things that we get to experiment with, and I'm very excited about it.
You know, just listening you talk about the songs and the sound, it kind of reminds me kind of like Ice Turf. Have you ever listened to any of their stuff?
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah, that kind of what it sounds like. But you know, and getting back to Kiss for a minute, because you know, you bring up a very good point that, you know, you listen to certain albums from different bands, and you can tell, okay, that's an album that came out, you know, that's an album from the 70s, or that came out in the 80s. I mean, I remember being a teenager, and I remember when Crazy Nights came out. I hear Paul Stanley, you know, he'd go on his little promo tour, and he'd be telling people, oh, Crazy Nights, check it out, man, it's Destroyer Part 2. And I kind of remember kind of going along with that for a while, you know, when I was a teenager, but then you grow up and you listen, no, Crazy Nights sounds nothing like Destroyer. Now maybe you could say that about, I would dare say Revenge sounds like, you know, Destroyer Part 2, but not Crazy Nights, you know. You can definitely tell Crazy Nights is an 80s album.
Yeah, it could be a perspective at that time, like maybe his mindset was there while he was writing it. And, you know, sometimes when we're too close to things artistically, like we can kind of get trapped in that bubble, and hey, we go, this is what this is, and then you step back. And I doubt that he would say that today, but I may be wrong. But again, there was also, you know, guys said whatever they needed to say to sell albums.
Oh, yeah, that was kind of the point I was making. It's kind of funny because, like, I remember being a teenager and hearing them, you know, hearing people do interviews and stuff and saying stuff like, you know, on the radio like that, and I being young and not really knowing, you kind of go along with it, you know, but then a few years later, you're like, hey, I don't know if I agree with that anymore, like I once did, you know.
Right, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, and then I want to ask you too, Mick, before I let you go. I seen on your Facebook page, there's also something you're talking about. Can you tell us what's the Cosmic Voice?
Oh, the Cosmic Voice is a podcast I do with my good buddy Chris Natalini, who's the lead singer to Blood Feast.
Oh, wow.
It's actually an extension to the Cosmic View. I started the Cosmic View almost 4 years ago. It was kind of like a fanboy thing for me to do, just to learn more about artists and get personal insight. I started interviewing artists, and I've interviewed you know, some guys at the top end and guys in the middle and guys at the low end. And what I do is I interview them in a way that I learn about the person who made the artist, rather than just like, hey, what's your favorite guitar and all this kind of stuff. I ask them more pointed, deep questions about them and their mindset and where they're coming from, so we learn a little bit more.
Oh, wow.
And there was talk about doing it in the form of a podcast or radio show, and I hemmed and hawed for about it for a lot of years. When we got back from the UK in March, after our tour had got cut short because of the travel ban and, you know, the whole world shut down, we started talking about it again, and I said, well, look, we'll do a podcast, and we'll take it from there, and that's where we're at. We've been doing it since July.
Wow.
It's been going pretty good. We've actually expanded a bit. We do the podcasts that are available on a bunch of different platforms.
Wow.
Now the show is available on Rock Addict Radio on Thursday nights at 8 p.m. And then we got another show that started. It's called Muck and Junk. It's a little comedy thing. We got two guys that it's part of a whole shtick thing where they just bitch and complain about stuff, and they're just short segments, and it's kind of more comedic than anything. But, but the Cosmic Voice is primarily, it talks about the music business, and you're kind of getting Chris and I and myself's perspective on the music business and how, you know, indie artists can kind of survive the currents and you know, so they don't lose their shirts. And it's just based on our experience and our things that we've done and tried, and it's kind of, again, we kind of, you know, we're kind of straightforward. It's transparent. We tell you when we've been able to make positive changes and when things didn't work for us, and hopefully people can use it as a learning experience.
I mean, it gives you a different perspective. I mean, it's something kind of a little extra fun out of your normal day to do. I mean, like you've been doing Corner Sanctuary probably pretty much nonstop since the beginning. It's kind of gives you a little different activity. So what's that been like for you, Mick? As a guy that's in the entertainment business yourself, got your own band going, to kind of shine a light on other musicians or other people out there.
I think I think it's awesome. I mean, for me, I think it's awesome. I mean, of course, right?
Yeah.
But like I said, I've used it as a learning experience. It's been a self-discovery thing, both the podcast and the interview stuff. I love learning about different perspectives, different ideologies, house.
Yeah.
Like the books that I usually read are biographies, because I like to learn about people. I'm not a big, just basic stories. I'd rather just watch the movie than that thing. So I've taken that love of the music, of being an artist, wanting to learn about artists, and it started out as maybe a hobby or a thing to help me kind of, like you said, break the norm, so I can kind of have a release at times. But now it's become more of a common thing. I mean, there's stuff that's happening all the time, and we're releasing interviews.
Now let me ask you, when you first started interviewing people, like, what was your interview style? The reason I ask is, I'll tell you, like anything, just talking about my own experience for a minute of interviewing people, like anything, I think I become better at it over the years. But I will tell you, when I go back and I listen back to some of the first interviews I ever did, I can tell the difference, because back when I first started, I really had no idea how to do this. It just came to me, and I wanted to give it a try. But I would write down questions. I think I'd be all prepared and everything, and then I'd listen back to it, and it almost sounded kind of robotic. Like, okay, question 1, question 2, where as you see me sitting here talking to you, it's like, well, I've known you a while, I've interviewed you before, so it's kind of like talking to an old friend in a way. And then you and me kind of relate in that we're both such huge Kiss fans, okay? And so I already have some ideas of what I'm going to, talk to you about. But if I go back and I listen to some of those first interviews I ever did, I found, don't have everything so planned out. Just kind of talk freely, and whatever comes out, Oh,
yeah, absolutely. I go back and, I'll go through some of the interviews, and I didn't really have that question structured well, or was I trying to say there?
Yeah.
And that should be expected. That's kind of normal, right? And as you get comfortable, and obviously, I'm working in a whole new medium, from the other side now. And it's a learning process. I look at it that way, too. Same with the podcast, same with this, same with the music. I mean, if I'm working at it, my goal is to try to get better. I'm trying to make myself better. I'm always hitting it out of the park with anything that I do. But I think there's a misconception of people that they'll hurt themselves to death and then they never do it.
Yeah.
And if they don't do it, then there's regret. And it's like, but they don't like it. People that are doing it. Well, do it takes a lot. It takes a lot of self-discipline. It takes a lot of dedication, hard work. So I'm a firm believer, man. Just jump the hell in. You'll learn to swim as you go along.
Yeah, and the other thing I found, Mick, is everybody has a story. So I'm talking to you, and you got a different life experience than I do, and that's kind of what makes it interesting to talk to you about. Even though we're both Kiss fans, you got a different.
Absolutely.
So see, that's the only thing people tell me is, your interviews are really long, but I kind of figure, well, it'll be over when it's over, because again, if I cut you off halfway through, 15 minutes, got to cut it off so we can get on YouTube or whatever. You don't get to tell the whole story. That's the thing.
Exactly. Yeah. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and the final question for you, Mick, is since you've been doing the Cosmic View and all that, who are some people you really enjoyed interviewing?
Well, I got to interview KK Downing, and I was just in, I was kind of in my fanboy thing. And
oh wow, yeah, yeah.
I was, I've gotten to interview Jeff Tate.
Oh wow.
Bruce Kulick.
Oh, wow.
He was very friendly, very nice guy. I got to interview, just because he caught me off guard there, Jack Russell.
Oh, he's cool. I've interviewed him. He's a super nice guy.
He's a real nice, easy to talk to guy. I know there's been a lot of upset good and bad about him, but I didn't find that. I thought he was being his genuine and as possible.
Yeah, you know, that's been my experience with Jack. Like, I interviewed him 2 or 3 times, and every time he tells me, hey, man, you know, keep my number. Anytime you want to talk to me, don't you hesitate to give me a call. And okay, Jack, thanks.
Yeah, it was very enjoyable. I just interviewed Steve Lynch, you know, formerly of Autograph.
Oh yeah, I have to check that out. Yeah,
very friendly, very intelligent, and you know, it's the guys that don't mind answering the questions, and there's a little bit more, which then more questions come out. I think it's fantastic. And then, like I said, I want to learn about the person.
Yeah.
And this is for me in a sense. I want to learn more about somebody else. You can learn about yourself in the process.
Oh yeah.
And I want to learn about the person who made the artist.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear your interview with Steve Lynch. I'll tell you why, because, I mean, as you were saying, I mean, that's another example of a guy who is a great songwriter, but it's amazing if you know anything about his story. He left Autograph, and he's making more money writing tunes for TV shows.
Yeah. There is a new project coming for 2021. You know, I mean, I guess everybody had to kind of push back plans or reschedule due to, you know, the pandemic and all, but there's a lot. I think we get back on track and figure out what normal is. I think there's going to be a lot of great stuff coming out in 2021.
Yeah, and we're just going to end with this, Mick, because I talk all day, but I know you're a busy man. And like I was saying, I just got to thank you as a music fan myself, because there are a lot of bands that have held off on releasing new music because of all this coronavirus stuff. But Corners of Sanctuary continue to put out great new music, and I want you all to go check out the new album when it comes out October 30th, and I'll let you know when the interview goes up. But thanks for doing this today, Mick. I'll be in touch, okay?
All right, sir. Thank you so much.
Take care.
I appreciate it. You have a great one. Be safe.
Bye-bye.